Today we are unlocking some pretty high-stakes knowledge. We're doing a deep dive into material that takes us right to the core of complex public works management. We're looking at the highly analytical content from the 2018 Ethiopian Construction Procurement and Contract Management Exit Exam, the CPCM.
And that date, 2018, is so important. We really have to focus on that. This isn't about memorizing facts. What we're covering is all about testing professional judgment. There was a huge pivot away from, simple recall-like defining a term. This is all about high application, analysis, and evaluation. The questions really force you to understand the consequences of management actions, especially within those local governance rules like the PPA directives or BAT COTA standards.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission here is pretty surgical. We're going to walk you through 18 simulated questions, the kind of questions that really demand you connect an action to its outcome. We'll give you the answer, of course, but more importantly, the high-level justification, the why behind the right decision. We've organized this whole thing by the three main learning outcomes. So let's just dive right in. Segment 1. This is all about learning outcome 1. Procurement processes, concepts, and governance frameworks. We're starting with the basics, the foundational rules. Legal compliance, the hierarchy of contract documents. All right, question 1, direct procurement justification. A procuring entity decides to procure highly specialized equipment from the single original manufacturer. This is due to standardization and compatibility issues with existing infrastructure. So which procurement method, according to Ethiopian public procurement guidelines, is legally justified for this action? Is it A, restricted tendering, B, international competitive bidding, C, direct procurement, or D, two-stage tendering?
Okay, so this scenario is pointing you straight towards direct procurement, which is answer C. This is a really critical application of the PPA guidelines, especially on the exceptions to competitive bidding. I mean, competition is the default, right? But direct procurement is legally justified when there's literally only one supplier who can do the job. And that's because of things like essential standardization or unique compatibility. It just means competition is, well, it's impossible.
But doesn't that create a risk? Relying on a single source, I'm thinking inflated pricing. Why would the rules even allow for that?
That's a great question. And they allow it because the consequence of not using that single source is actually worse. Think about it. If they were forced into, say, restricted tendering, they'd still only find one responsive supplier. It would just delay the whole project for no reason. The risk of abuse is handled because the justification has to be documented, it has to be reviewed, and it has to be tied directly to that technical need. So in this specific case, it's the only legal path.
That makes sense. The technical need basically overrides the competition requirement. Okay, question 2. This one is on the hierarchy of contract documents. Which of the following contract documents typically takes precedence over the general conditions of contract, the GCC, in case of a discrepancy? The options are A, the letter of acceptance, B, the bill of quantities, C, the contractor's technical proposal, or D, the special conditions of contract.
The answer here is definitively D, the Special Conditions of Contract, or SCC. This is just a fundamental concept in contract interpretation. You have to know this for good contract management. The general conditions, the GCC, that's just standardized boilerplate language. It's generic. The SCC, on the other hand, that's where you put all the modifications, the additions, all the specific clauses that are tailored exactly to this project. So if there's a conflict, the specific intent in the SCC always wins over the general terms in the GCC.
Got it. Specific over general. Okay. Question 3. EOT administrative agent. A contractor submits a request for extension of time, an EOT citing severe and unforeseen heavy rainfall. According to standard conditions like BAT COTA or FANDA, who is initially responsible for assessing and granting this EOTA, the employer's legal counsel, B, the project manager or engineer, C, the Federal Procurement Dispute Committee, or D, the National Arbitration Tribunal.
That responsibility falls squarely on B, the project manager or engineer. Things like claims and EOTs, they're core administrative processes. They happen all the time during a project. And the project manager or engineer, they are the designated contractual agent right there on site. They have the technical know-how and the contractual authority to look at the facts, see how the rain delay actually impacts the schedule, and make that first call. Options C and D, the dispute committees and tribunals, they only get involved much later if the issue can't be resolved.
Right, so it's an operational decision first, not a legal battle. Question 4. A legal concept in contract formation. In the context of contract formation, which legal concept refers to the legal standing and authorization of the person signing the agreement to commit their organization? A, consideration, B, mutuality of obligation, C, legal capacity, or D, performance bond?
The concept you're looking for here is C, legal capacity. And this is just a foundational legal pillar. When a CEO signs a contract, you have to be sure they have the legal capacity, the standing, the authorization to bind their whole company. If the person signing doesn't have that capacity, the whole contract could be void. It just fails to protect anyone.
It protects the integrity of the contract right from the moment it's created. Makes sense. Okay, question 5. Subcontractor payment clause. A construction contract includes a clause stating that payments to the subcontractor are dependent solely upon the main contractor receiving payment from the employer. This is a common but very debated clause. What is it legally known as? A. Quantum meruit. B. Pay when paid clause.
Yeah.
C. Liquidated damages clause. Or D. Retention withholding clause.
That is the pay when paid clause, answer B. It's a mechanism that directly ties downstream payments to the upstream flow of money. It's very common. But the key consequence, the thing you have to analyze, is that it shifts a huge amount of financial risk, specifically cash flow risk, right onto the subcontractor. So if the employer is late paying the main contractor, the sub has no way to demand payment, even if their work is totally done.
That sounds incredibly unfair, especially for smaller subcontractors who've already paid for labor and materials. Is a clause like that even enforceable everywhere?
Well, its enforceability really varies by jurisdiction. Standard contract forms might include it, but, local regulations often try to limit its harsher effects. Sometimes they're even unenforceable if the delay is unreasonable. The key takeaway for analysis, though, is that its purpose is always to transfer that cash flow risk. That's why it's such a critical point for contract managers to understand.
Right. It's about spotting where the risk is being shifted. Okay, last one for this segment. Question 6. Contract planning phase. Which action is characteristic of the contract planning phase within project procurement management? A. Negotiating and signing the agreement. B. Physically monitoring a subcontractor's safety procedures. C. Determining the contract type like lump sum versus unit rate and identifying required terms. Or D. Finalizing acceptance and closing out the contract.
The defining action of the planning phase is C. Absolutely. Contract planning is strategic. It happens before you even go to tender. You're analyzing the project's scope, its risks, and that decision, whether to use a lump sum for a well-defined scope or a unit rate for an uncertain one, that's a foundational choice you make right here. It structures everything that follows. The other options, A is award, B is administration, and D is closeout. They all happen later.
So if I were to summarize segment 1, we've set up the strict legal rules. We know how to justify exceptions like direct procurement. We know the SEC is king, and we know who has authority on site. It's all about minimizing legal vulnerability.
Exactly. We've established the rules and the agents. Now, as we move into segment 2, we need to focus on the why. What are the benefits and mandatory requirements that make sure public money is spent effectively and fairly?
Okay, we're shifting into segment 2 now, covering LO2. Benefits and requirements of procurement. This is all about the mandatory requirements that drive fairness and project integrity. Let's start with question 7, on the purpose of standard bidding documents, or SBDs. The Ethiopian public procurement law often mandates using SBDs for government tenders. What's the chief requirement this fulfills for bidder participation? Is it 2? A. Ensure all bidders submit the lowest possible price. B. Allow the procuring entity to negotiate terms post-bid. Provide a uniform framework for fair and objective comparison of bids. Or D. Ensure only international firms participate.
The answer is C. A uniform framework that allows for fair and objective comparison. SBDs standardize everything in the tender process, the format, the specs, everything. And that standardization is absolutely essential in public procurement. The goal has to be transparency, a level playing field. Without it, you'd be comparing apples and oranges, which just opens the door to subjectivity, bias, potential corruption. SBDs enforce that objective comparison.
Right. Everyone plays by the same rules. Question 8. Purpose of performance security. A procuring entity requires a performance security of 10% of the contract price. If the contractor fails to achieve substantial completion on time, what is the primary financial purpose of this security? A. To cover the cost of administering liquidated damages. B. To provide funds for the employer to complete the work or fix defects if the contractor defaults. C. To serve as the first payment towards retention. Or D. To compensate the engineer for extended supervision.
The primary purpose is B. A performance security is basically an insurance policy. It's a guarantee. Liquidated damages, which is option A, they cover delays. But the performance security protects the employer from the worst-case scenario, contractor default. If the contractor just walks away, the employer calls on that security to get immediate funds to hire someone else to finish the job or to fix critical problems. It saves the project financially.
It's the ultimate safety net. Question 9. Benefit of unit price contracts. What's the most direct benefit to a client when they use a unit price contract for foundation work in highly variable ground conditions? A. Transfers all cost risks to the contractor. B. Allows for fair price adjustment based on actual measured quantities. C. Guarantees the shortest project duration. Or D. Eliminates the need for detailed quantity surveying.
The most direct benefit is B. It allows for fair adjustment based on actual measured quantities. Unit price contracts are the perfect tool for when you have an uncertain scope, and highly variable ground conditions is a textbook example of that. Unlike a lump sum contract where the contractor owns all the quantity risk, here the client only pays for the actual amount of excavation or concrete that's measured and verified. It ensures fairness when uncertainty is high.
So you only pay for what you actually get.
Yeah.
Question 10. Purpose of turnover requirements. A contractor keeps submitting bids that are non-responsive because they fail to meet the mandatory turnover requirements. What is the regulatory purpose of this requirement? Is it to verify the bidders? A. Technical capacity. B. Commitment to using local labor. C. Financial capability and stability for a project of this scale. Or D. Ability to secure a license renewal.
Turnover requirements are all about verifying C, the bidder's financial capability and stability. It's a measure of a company's recent historical revenue, their turnover. And that revenue stream is a direct indicator of their ability to manage the huge cash flow and operational demands of a big new project. If a company can't show they've managed that kind of financial scale before, they're just seen as too risky no matter how good their technical skills are.
Makes sense. They need to prove they can handle the money side. Question 11. Procurement integrity requirement. To ensure fairness and maintain the integrity of the process, Ethiopian federal guidelines prohibit the evaluation committee from doing what? A. Requesting clarification on ambiguities in a bid. B. Rejecting a bid that's way below the cost estimate. C. Allowing a bidder to correct or alter quoted unit prices after the bid opening. Or D. Negotiating non-price technical components before the award.
The absolute prohibition, the one that just destroys integrity, is C. You cannot allow a bidder to alter their quoted price after the bids are opened. That is the moment the price gets locked in. Requesting clarification, that's option A. That's generally fine. You're just trying to understand the bid better. Even rejecting an abnormally low bid, option B, is often required. But changing the unit price, that opens the door to collusion and manipulation. It violates the core principle of objective comparison.
That fine line between clarification and alteration seems tricky. How do you distinguish between those in practice without getting into trouble?
Well, it's a legal boundary. Clarification is just about understanding what was already submitted. Asking, did you mean metric tons or cubic meters here? That's clarification. Alteration is changing the commercial submission. If a bidder says, oh, I made a math error, let me lower this rate, that's completely prohibited. The second it impacts a financial ranking, you've crossed a line.
Got it. Okay, last one for this segment. Question 12. Record keeping and claims. Effective contract management requires detailed record-keeping, daily weather, instructions, resource deployment. The primary requirement this addresses is the ability to properly administer claims, specifically by A. Ensuring the contractor is paid for extra equipment. B. Calculating the accurate profit margin. C. Providing contemporaneous evidence to substantiate or refute requests for time and cost adjustments. Or D. Facilitating a rapid site handover.
The answer is C. Providing contemporaneous evidence. Record-keeping is the absolute backbone of claims management. I can't stress that enough. Without meticulous dated records, what we call contemporaneous evidence, any claim for a time extension or a cost increase just becomes one person's word against another's. These records provide objective proof made at the time of the event, so both sides can substantiate or reject requests. It's key to preventing disputes later on.
So if we pause here, the big takeaway from segment 2 seems to be that integrity and financial security are the driving forces. SBDs for fairness, performance security, and turnover requirements to protect the client's money.
Exactly. These aren't just administrative hoops to jump through, they're sophisticated risk mitigators. They make sure the project stays viable even if things go wrong. Knowing that helps you manage procurement as a strategy, not just a checklist.
And here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving into segment 3, learning outcome 3. Delivery systems, risk allocation, and evaluation. This is pure high-level application. This is the 2018 exam standard where you have to evaluate which management choice best fits a really specific, complex project goal. Question 13. Delivery system evaluation. A public client needs a high-quality university building. They need it done rapidly, they're willing to participate in the management, and they want maximum control over the design, all while maintaining a guaranteed maximum price, a GMP. Which project delivery system is best evaluated for meeting all these objectives? A. Design Bid Build, DBB, B, turnkey contract, C, construction management at risk, CMAR, or D, engineer procure construct, EPC.
The optimal choice that balances all those competing priorities is C, CMAR. This question is a classic risk analysis test. You need speed, right? CMAR allows for fast tracking. Construction can start while the design is still being finalized. You need control. The owner keeps the designer so they have maximum input. And you need cost certainty, which is the GMP feature. DBB is too slow. EPC or turnkey, options B and D, they transfer design control completely away from the owner. CMAR is the one that's specifically designed for these kinds of high-stakes projects.
So it's the best fit for balancing those three demands: speed, control, and cost. Question 14. Risk and time and materials, or T&M, contracts. When you're analyzing the risk in a T&M contract modification, which party carries the highest risk of cost overruns from things like unforeseen changes in productivity or wage rates? Is it A, the engineer consultant, B, the subcontractor, C, the contractor, or D, the employer client?
Oh, this is a critical risk allocation question. The highest risk falls on D, the employer or client. In a T&M structure, the contractor is just being reimbursed for their actual time and materials. So if productivity drops or wage rates suddenly spike, the project takes longer and costs more, and the client is the one who absorbs all of that financial exposure. The contractor is basically insulated from those risks. They just pass the actual costs through to the client.
Wow. So the second something unexpected happens, the client's budget is immediately at risk. That's a huge management challenge.
A huge one. And you typically only use a T&M contract when the scope is too vague or urgent to price up front. But the cost of that flexibility is placing that open-ended risk directly on the employer.
Right. Okay, question 15. Commencement of the maintenance period. A contractor gets a substantial completion certificate, but there are minor defects that will take 6 weeks to fix. Under the terms of the contract, when does the maintenance period start? A, after the minor fixes are done. B, 6 months after the final payment. C, from the date on the substantial completion certificate. Or D, from the date the contract was signed.
The maintenance period, or the defects liability period, it begins C, from the date specified on the substantial completion certificate. This is so key to contract administration. Substantial completion means the building is fit for its purpose, the employer can start using it. Even if there are minor defects, punch list items, the clock on the warranty and defect coverage starts ticking right away. The fixing happens at the same time, but it doesn't delay the start of that period.
The clock starts immediately. Got it. Question 16. Role of a dispute adjudication board, or DAB. Under standard procedures, what specific outcome is a DAB typically used to achieve? A, to determine the engineer's liability for design errors. B, to provide a binding but non-final decision on disputes, encouraging parties to avoid litigation. C, to certify the project's financial closeout. Or D, to formally terminate the contract.
The correct outcome, the one that defines the DAB's sophisticated role, is B. The whole purpose of a DAB is to keep the project moving. It gives a rapid, expert decision that is binding, meaning the parties have to comply with it immediately. But, and this is crucial, it's non-final. If a party disagrees, they can still challenge it later in arbitration or court. But the work isn't allowed to stop while they do that. It's designed specifically to prevent disputes from derailing huge construction projects.
That binding but non-final distinction is the real analytical core there. That's its practical value. Okay, question 17. Cost plus fixed fee financial analysis. A contractor using a cost plus fixed fee contract has a substantial increase in site overhead costs. When you evaluate the final project cost, this increase will result in whatever A, an increase in the contractor's overhead but not the fixed fee, B, a negotiated reduction in the fixed fee, C, an increase in both the reimbursable cost and the fixed fee, or D, a direct increase in the reimbursable cost while the fixed fee remains unchanged.
This is a test of your understanding of cost structure. The answer is D. In this contract type, the contractor's profit, the fixed fee, is preset. It's constant. It doesn't change with project costs. Site overheads are a variable, and they're part of the reimbursable cost. So when overheads go up, that cost is passed directly to the client as an increase in the total reimbursable cost, but the contractor's fixed profit stays exactly the same. The cost risk is all on the client.
Okay, last question. Number 18. Domestic preference application. A foreign company submits a bid for an Ethiopian road project under International Competitive Bidding, ICB. When evaluating the bid prices for comparison, the procuring entity applies a percentage reduction to the price submitted by eligible domestic bidders. This action is the practical application of what? A, bid price negotiation, B, domestic preference, C, price adjustment due to inflation, or D, foreign exchange risk mitigation.
That action is the practical application of B, domestic preference. This is a policy that's mandated by governance frameworks like the PPAs, and it's designed to support local industries. During the evaluation of an ICB, the policy artificially lowers the evaluated price of domestic firms by a set percentage, but for comparison purposes only. This gives them a built-in competitive advantage against international firms, even if their actual price is a little bit higher.
So what does this all mean? We've just flown through 18 pretty high-level concepts, and it is so clear that the 2018 exam standard wasn't about just defining terms. It was all about connecting contract structures and rules to risk and to outcomes.
Precisely. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, the trend shows that competence in management means understanding not just what a contract is, but how it allocates risk. For instance, in that T&M question, knowing the definition is basic. But understanding that a T&M structure transfers all the productivity risk to the client, that's the high-level application test. You have to live by the implications of the rules.
That shift from what to how, from just knowing to actually applying, that's the key takeaway for any learner tackling this kind of complex material.
Right. And to leave you with a final thought to mull on, we talked about legal capacity today as a pillar of contract validity. But the other side of that coin, the consideration, the value exchanged, is also vital. So think about this. What happens to a construction contract if the agreed-upon consideration, let's say a very rare material needed for the build, is found to be impossible to deliver because of some unforeseen geological event? Does the entire contract just fail? Or do standard contract laws require the courts to look for a more equitable solution, like enforcing the contract but with a cost adjustment? Think about how these legal concepts protect not just the parties, but the project itself.